Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all on-site and online participants for this workshop where you'll hear a great set of speakers. We have both online and on-site today. We will dedicate a few minutes at the end for direct exchanges, so you can already get ready and prepare your questions and remarks. Digital infrastructure, this is what we're here to talk about today. The digital infrastructure underpins the economy of today, but also the economy of tomorrow. From broadband network, data centers, cloud services, to protocols and standards that ensure interoperability of tech platforms, services, and systems. How digital infrastructure is designed affects the degree to which economic power is concentrated or distributed, how innovation is stifled or encouraged, and prosperity is available to the many or to a few. The stakes for digital infrastructure have never been higher. Rapid advances in technologies, in particular generative AI, are not only transforming the nature of work and everyday life, but also it is redefining the meaning of sovereignty on the individual level, but also for communities and countries across the globe. So making data agency is all the more necessary. And at Project Liberty Institute, we are guided by a North Star, giving people a voice, a choice, and stake in their digital life. And a technical solution to allow such a scenario need to be built, scaled, but also, most importantly, adopted. So our common grounds between the IGF theme this year is building. Building sustainable and responsible innovation, building digital trust, resilience, and so on. And the good news today is that we have many builders around the table. Builders of alternative digital infrastructures, of protocols, of business models, of governance approaches. And all of what we are doing, and which you'll hear about today, resonate with what we call the fair data economy, and particularly the fair data economy recommendations. They were developed last November by Project Liberty Institute and its impressive task force. So I will now hand it over to my colleague, Paul Fellinger, to kick off the discussion and tell us more about this concept of a fair data economy. And Paul will be online today.
Hello and greetings to all of you. Good morning. I wish I could be there in person in Norway on this 20th anniversary Internet Governance Forum. So the Fair Data Economy Task Force is really a foundational initiative for Project Liberty Institute. The task force launched its recommendations about 9 months ago at the Project Liberty Summit that took then place in Washington, D.C., and it followed 6 months of really intense international multi-stakeholder work. And the Fair Data Economy Task Force is composed of 18 distinguished members spanning all stakeholder groups, international organizations, governments, innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, builders of technical infrastructure, as well as leading academics, and even Darren Acemoglu, who won last year the Nobel Prize in Economics. In total, the task force spanned members from 10 countries all around the world. And as Sarah said in her opening remarks, the current status quo of the digital economy has negative externalities on market structures, on the very fabric of societies and, well, our democracies. And to a large extent, this is linked to the business models and the underpinning infrastructure that enables it on the internet. And the current status quo is not really great for entrepreneurs. It is not really great for people and users of technology, and it's really not great for a majority of investors either. So the question is, how could we rewire the data economy? Can we build a better ecosystem that works for all different actors? And how can we build a better data economy where people have agency over their data that is on firm economic grounds, that can scale? So to do this, the task force published its blueprint for innovation and growth across 4 areas: next generation digital infrastructure as a key enabler, business model innovation and entrepreneurship, policy innovation, and capital allocation. And we are very pleased that we have, in this distinguished panel that you will get to know in just a second, 2 members of the Fair Data Economy Task Force. We have with us today Jean-Bertrand Atsampo, who's the principal advisor to the African Union Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade, Tourism, Industry and Minerals. He should be online, but he is not online yet, so we will see if he can join us momentarily. So I would like to start and give the floor to Sujit Nair, who's the CEO and co-founder of FIDE. And in many ways, FIDE is implementing already in the market at incredible scale in India what the Fair Data Economy Task Force has been talking about in its recommendations, which is business model innovation really powered by next generation digital infrastructure. So Sujit, I would like to start with you and give you the floor. Can you tell us a bit more about the backend protocol and how it embodies this approach of a fair data economy? What is the role of the infrastructure protocol backend in enabling a better data economy?
Okay. Thank you, Paul. So backend essentially, of course, is an open protocol that embodies interoperability fundamentally. This idea of backend protocol was an attempt to reimagine how in an online economy we move value, how we put people, communities, and businesses at the center of their own sort of economic, social, commercial lives by giving them agency on how they hold and keep data and share data, but more importantly, translate data into value. So backend protocol does fundamentally allow transaction, exchange of value, how you express, discover, engage, contract, and fulfill an offtake value between any consumer and a provider as actors. How do you do that? And it's an imagination that tries to make a departure from this very incumbent thinking of a platform-based movement of value. In fact, what you see with the platforms and marketplaces as we are seeing today, and it's a rapid sort of evolution in the last 2 decades, is a way for both consumers and providers to be necessarily on the same platform managed by one platform intermediary, and in the pretext of discovering, sharing goods and services or any form of value on that platform, you have this model of both having to be on the same platform, operated as a closed platform, and allowing the value to remain on the platform as a capture of value rather than a free flow of value. So from a fair data economic principles, what backend protocol does is fundamentally unlock that agency for any consumer and provider. It could be a taxi driver. We have about 500,000 taxi drivers in India, not necessarily on these big ride-hailing platforms, but use backend to discover rides and service those rides and keep the entire revenue to themselves. There is no big commissions by the intermediate platforms because there's no such platform using backend protocol. It's an open network where everybody brings their end of the node to this, and the drivers also get to have the holdership of their own data. Today, when the drivers have to move from one platform to the other, they don't have access, agency to keeping their data, be it their ride reputation or ride history and things like that. Backend protocol allows you to port that data to any other platform and continue from the new platform they've opted to be part of. So this ability to retain ownership of data, expressing data and services, goods and services, and ability to discover parties who would like to do transactions, business with you, and therefore amplify your economic value of the work and the services you offer, is essentially a way of thinking with backend protocol. And that's how we are trying to bring some of these fair data economic principles, baking into the fundamental architecture of how we think about value exchange happens in an online economy. Paul, back to you.
And we're still waiting for Jean-Bertrand to join it. I hope he doesn't have major technical problems to connect. But maybe, Sujit, can I ask you the question, sort of what for you is the main takeaway and message to the entire ecosystem gathered here at the Internet Governance Forum worldwide the builders, the investors, the entrepreneurs, the consumers, the policymakers that came out of this intense international multi-stakeholder work that we did together in the Fair Data Economy Task Force?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the remarkable outcomes of that effort is how we have seen agreement on some universal principles of how we think a fair data economy of the future should operate. The principles of moving agency to the ends, allowing, like I said, peoples and business to be in the center and not the big platforms, and reimagining the possibilities of how we create value. When we take this departure from having these models of lone heroes as big platforms trying to solve problems for the whole of humanity, but this idea that with these principles you can distribute that ability to solve, distribute that agency, and allow everybody to participate in their own way, retaining their agency and autonomy, for me is something fundamental. And it's heartening to see there are protocols like the DSNP protocol of Project Liberty, Beacon protocol, all of them sort of aligning to those principles and vision and taking that forward. Of course, it also is a wake-up call to see how we need to do a lot more beyond the formulations of the principles that the task force has put together, but to put them into practice and drive civil society, market players, policymakers all come and fundamentally think about this as the core central principles of how we think about the evolution of the online economy, and make it contextually relevant to the varying needs and cares of different regions. I'm here in Oslo also to have some conversations around the whole coming opportunity and the challenge of energy transition, and what does it mean to make countries in Africa, in India, and in Europe sort of build reliable, secure agency and energy independence as an individual, as an economy. And these are some of the conversations which also fundamentally need to bring aspects of fair data principles into the conversation for how we think about future of energy. I mean, I'm trying to make an example out of energy, but the idea is that it's so fundamental that it cuts across multiple sectors, not just commerce, not just some part of digital payments, but more foundational aspects of our society like access to energy. So I think it's a very pertinent set of principles that we must consider in all walks of life as we become increasingly digitally native in our lives. Yeah. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Sujit, and all of you at the IGF. You can find the recommendations of the Fair Data Economy Task Force on the website projectliberty.io. And Sujit, you gave the perfect segue. This is about scaling next generation digital infrastructure for data agency, which is the title of our session today. And with this perfect segue, I want to give it back to Sarah on site in Norway to continue the discussion and introduce us to our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Paul. So you mentioned actually, Sujit, and thank you for that, the DSNP. So I'd like to hand it over to Vice President and Chief Architect of DSNP and Frequency, so Wes Biggs. We talked about transparency. We talked about redistributing value. We talked about giving people more power over their data. So it seems that data agency is probably the core component and the common ground that we're talking about today. And it seems also that data agency is a core architecture principle of the decentralized social networking protocol. So Wes, could I turn to you and to tell the room here in person and online how technically does the DSNP work? How does it embody this principle of data agency for its almost 2 million users today?
Thanks, Sarah, and great to see everyone here. As you mentioned, I'm a technology architect and contributor to DSNP, consensus seeker perhaps with our diverse set of technologists, academics, civil society advisors working on the protocol. It is a protocol stewarded by the Project Liberty Institute under an open governance model that I think you'll hear more about. And the origin of DSNP is really this the realization, and I think this is very much tied to this fair data economy piece, that the Web 2.0 model, which did great things for people, connected people in new and fundamental ways, but it was mediated always by centralized platforms. And those platforms have been designed and optimized to extract the value of the network effects that are created in these systems by the participants. From a fundamental point of view, DSMP is about taking the network effects out of the network and sharing that value between all the stakeholders that are participating. And to do that, we start at the very low level, at the protocol level, where we want to talk about not applications, but how systems can communicate with one another on a fundamental level, and that means data and the operations on that data and how that flows across connected spaces. We start with DSMP by challenging that simple assertion of the centralized system that needs to mediate these spaces. And to do that, and I'll quote from the specification, to ensure decentralization, a DSMP system must avoid having any single point of failure and must avoid having any single entity that can override its consensus mechanisms. So we talk about a consensus system, which is a technical term that has evolved very rapidly over the past decade or so. You fit blockchains and other systems within that, public permissionless blockchains, for example, and it creates a system where no single business, company, computer is in charge of the way the system operates. Starting with that fundamental principle, we can build things on top of that. We can build affordances for starting with identity, and identity being something that can be long-lived for users of social networking services. It can be human-friendly. It doesn't have to be a cryptographic wallet that everyone has to remember their password for. It can be, however, cryptographically strong with these systems in order to provide control and agency over the data that is then attached and accumulated with this identity over time in the public space. One of the core things that comes quickly after identity is this idea of attestation, the idea of having verified attributes that can be part of one's identity in the social spaces, and that might be professional credentials, that might be simply proof of your own humanness versus an AI or a bot. These things can go into the protocol, and then we move to more abstract ideas that underpin the social fabric that we've seen across lots of different applications, but in unconnected ways. And we want to create a universal social graph that can establish connections that are long-lived outside the context of one application that can then be ported and used interoperably between many applications that participate using the same protocol. That social graph can be your friendships, your connections, your followings on social media, and those are all now relationships that can live on outside the life cycle of any particular application that you use to access your social network. And finally, there are affordances around social content, social media that we've seen across all the varying and often quickly evolving areas of social media as well. So this is not fundamentally just about text or video or anything like that, but a protocol for any of those types of communications that we want to connect our social networks with over time. And really, overall, this comes back to this economic principle that we are allowing with this protocol layer an innovation of economic models for the applications that participate in the social networking sphere, and that can move away then from a focus that drives toward always an ad tech surveillance model. So there's value exchange for all the participants involved.
Thank you very much, Wes. So with the example of FIDE with Beacon, with DSNP, and all those protocols, and there are many others that are existing. I'm thinking of the AT protocol and others. these examples exist. They're in practice and people can use them. So many alternative governance model, technical innovation, they're today available for use. However, it seems that most users are still kind of stuck on the platforms of the centralized digital economy. So let me turn over to Wendy. Wendy, as a DSNP advisor and the co-chair and the chair of the DSNP Governance Working Group, you've been thinking about these questions of governance a lot for these last years. I have a more governance and technical question at the same time for you, which is how can we bridge all these solutions that are existing somewhere on the ecosystem, but somewhat not scalable enough to gather enough users? What's missing today for this solution to truly collaborate better to represent this scalable alternative to a centralized digital economy? Is this something that we're doing wrong or something that we're still not doing about this?
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you to our hosts and everyone here. I think it's tempting to answer your question with the universal computer science answer. Take a hard problem, add another layer of abstraction, and you have the answer. So among all of the existing protocols and places where people are today, you could say, add another layer above of an interchange layer, add standards for data exchange among them, import and export of data, make regulation to enforce the availability of those, and you might get there, and there's promising work in standards development for interoperability. There's promising work from regulators thinking about how to make platforms provide for their end users, for the individuals, the ability to take their own data and have control of where they express it. And there's work in sort of cooperation frameworks, governance frameworks, to think about what would it take to give people confidence that when they took their data from one platform to another, they would be able to preserve the terms they wanted for that, and not just be turning it over to different terms of control by another proprietary system. And yet, I think we need to look at this as sort of a techno-social challenge, that it's not just a matter of building interoperable tech and the people will come and the solutions will come out of that. It's also a matter of figuring out how we, as society and as builders of ecosystems, will align the incentives so that there are stable configurations that preserve interoperability. And one of the values of these multi-stakeholder dialogues is as opportunities to find solutions that serve the needs of the various participants in the ecosystem. It's not enough for the end users to be supplicants to businesses saying, please give us our data. They should also be able to present themselves as customers, as collaboratives, as communities on equal footing, to say we bring value to the ecosystem by our participation there, and we will only bring it on terms where we have the privacy that we expect, the autonomy to enforce terms of our choosing. And it's easier to say that than to do that. requires organizing, it requires cooperation, and it's not as easy for individuals as simply taking an app that's offered to them in the App Store and for free, advertising supported, and saying, go ahead. But it's a matter of building toward a more empowering experience long term. So I think in the work that DSNP is doing, in the work that others are doing to help build sort of empowered end user participation in governance, to find cooperation and collaboration, to find cooperation experiences that recognize the value of commercial incentives, the value of individual autonomy, the value of non-commercial and social interchange, the value, the interests of government participation, the interests of technical and scientific development. We can work toward frameworks that have a longer-term, sustainable, interoperable data interchange.
So interoperability is also a big part of the response towards scaling those digital infrastructure that we're talking about, especially because network effects are really strong out there, and they're probably one of the main reason why we're not able today to bring most users into a technical solution that protects better their data, better their privacy, and so on. So Sujit, to what extent is this component of interoperability particularly important for you to beat the network effect? You've been talking about already millions of users on Beacon. How do you work with that kind of component on top of data agency?
Yes, and Sarah, if you allow me to sort of use the remarks from Wes to sort of build on as a way to answer your question on interoperability, and I think some very interesting remarks from Wes on the idea of this natural tendency, this urge for us to think about this abstracting and creating protocols and trying and putting this sort of very elaborate formal governance structures around that idea of a tech protocol idea, and it's one thing therefore to sort of bake interoperability as a principle into the technical designs. But to the point that Wes said, and I fully echo with that, when we started the Beacon protocol effort as a foundation about 5 years ago, we had this urge to sort of build this protocol, build a global community around governance of the protocol, and then think about seeing, okay, how do we make this, put this in work, and let people see value. But one of the sort of the early sort of, when I retrospectively think about right now wise things we could do, is to not wait for the governance and the protocol to actually take off. We actually put the idea of interoperability in the hands of people. It's very remarkable that in the very early years of Beacon, you don't normally expect taxi drivers to talk about protocols. Yeah, so, but when they see that, when I got a call, literally got a call from a few of the taxi drivers in the city of Bangalore, from the unions, and saying, we understand the protocol because we live the problem. We live the problem of not having this power of interoperability to amplify agency, because we are stuck in these big walled gardens of ride-hailing platforms, and they onboard us as partners, but now they treat us like as if they are a boss and go through what they have to make us go through. I think then they said that for me, the value of Beacon protocol was to give me that sense of control about where I want to be, how I make myself discoverable as a taxi driver to a rider in the city, and offer my own terms of price and be fair in that process, and then let my own ability to serve the customer with the right be the reason why I get recognized for more rights, and build trust as a service provider. And that idea of that value, discovering that value with this principles of interoperability, for me would be the first significant step we should think about. And the interoperability for me has to be seen as value in the eyes of those beholders, right? Whether it's taxi drivers. Today, we moved on. We kind of expanded that ability to perceive value with this idea from taxi drivers to about 200,000 small mom and pop shops in India. It's operating in 1,000 cities. We have about close to 1 million SKUs available from goods and services available on one big, massive, interoperable open network of commerce in India called ONDC, Open Network for Digital Commerce. Think of it like India's own commerce open internet and not a platform. And every day we see conversations around how it is unlocking value for people whom it matters. We have smallest of artisans able to ship products to customers thousands of miles away at a very low cost of the things we talk about: customer acquisition, customer transaction servicing, and able to therefore expand their business. And we are able to do that to find a girl child in a remote part of India, find scholarship just to be taking an exam, online exam, finding scholarship through the same network. So discovering financing support, opportunity to find jobs. So one of the things about interoperability is to think about how we can straddle value in multiple layers and let users see value. Most often, the perception of value comes from the exact service they operate, and they get stuck in these apps. But you need to put interoperability as a core value manifestation in the hands. You work from the value backwards to why interoperability is a way to unlock that vis-a-vis the other closed platforms. So that's one of the things. And we have realized that by driving adoption more than formalizing governance, we were able to achieve a lot more articulation for why interoperability is useful. And now, given that we have a fairly reasonable scale adoption in India, we have done over 200 million transactions on this protocol. We now realize that it can now stabilize, protect those investments that users and the user platforms are making onto this protocol. And to stabilize that and give it a more consistent evolution, we are now formalizing some of the governance structures around it. So adoption preceding governance, value enablement, and value articulation and visibility is one of the things we think about how interoperability has to reach the people. Sometimes otherwise we just keep losing this conversation in a more techno and a policy circles, but how does it matter in the hands of people is something that I think is a very important aspect of how we talk about interoperability and demonstrate interoperability.
So that's very interesting because we often hear that in all those technical alternative spaces, especially the decentralized web community, the open source community, often the technical aspiration and assumption are sometimes disaligned with what users are actually expecting. Many people from that community are often expecting also users to have a certain level of technical ability and to understand things that is part of their language only. And so there's often this obstacle to scalability. So you touched on this and you showed exactly that all of these technical terms are actually translating into usefulness in the daily life. And you could go back on this, but I would like to hear also Wes on this specific part. How do we go beyond those obstacles of technically assuming people have a certain level or ability to understand technically what is a decentralized social graph, for instance, in the case of DSNP, or what is even interoperability? How do we demonstrate the value to them? I think Becken has done a great job at this. What is the perspective of DSNP on that front?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Suji's made that point really articulately, that people are are not wowed by these terms, right? You go out in the street and say, do you want interoperability? Do you want data agency? That's not top of mind, right? Perhaps to me, because I'm a technologist, but not everyone is thinking about the usefulness of the internet in those terms. And I think it's interesting to look at how these alternatives have evolved as well, and in the social media and social networking space, things like the AT protocol and Blue Sky, the Mastodon and Fediverse community. Many alternative models have been pioneered by essentially marginalized communities that have had strong needs for safe spaces unmediated by centralized controllers. And there's almost a natural suspicion of interoperability in some of these spaces as needing to give something up, because historically that's been the case. It's been a choice between reach and scale of this kind of big room idea of social media on one hand, and then data agency and control and the ability to express oneself authentically on the other. But that's also a very constraining way of kind of thinking about a choice of communication modes. And that's created challenges of interoperability and bridging across both the protocols, but also the kind of content communities, the spheres of content that we think about when we interrogate the internet. We're good at navigating that spectrum as human beings in our real life. So we're used to having spaces of all different sorts of sizes that we can participate in, from a family space to a classroom to our towns and communities, and public speaking in spaces as well. So I think there's a real challenge when we think about these technical affordances and how do we take them mainstream? And I don't mean that in simply just creating one big space, but how do we create a way to connect this social graph that underpins things like DSMP and utilize that in a very useful way across the many spheres that I participate in and you participate in. So if an empowering protocol can give access to all these levels of control and details and so on, you're thinking about this very complicated machine, and how do everyday internet users then operate that machine? That's you don't want to. You want to meet people, where they are and where their understanding of how they can extract the usefulness from these platforms can be. And I think there's several ways to do that. Obviously, you need that underlying kind of protocol and governance layer that's going to protect that ability. But I think that strong defaults and nudges at the intersection of the user experience and the protocol are very important there. You need to create an environment that kind of naturally fits the way people are used to interacting and communicating. And I think there's a real opportunity there as we move forward in the agentic AI era to help translate these human needs and the ability for humans to express how they want to participate in these spaces, and translate those into the technical choices that are embodied in these protocols. So I think it's about creating languages where people can express what usefulness means to them, and have that embodied and expressed as it goes down the stack to the protocol level.
I'm very interested about one thing, and I'll hand it over to Paul after this, but I would like to ask the three of you, especially if you have different opinion, that might be interesting. Do you think in an ideal world that users should know about all these technicalities and about the protocols and know we're very excited about all these things here because we're basically internet nerds? Or is it completely fine if they don't know anything about it, but yet they have the transparency maybe to have a look if they're interested in it? Is there like a strong vision that you have on the level of technical savviness that your users would need to have to use the protocol?
I think if I can speak for everybody here, I don't think there's a difference in the view, but I think I would like to bring certain nuances from my own experience as to how does that translate into a real executable, action on ground to sort of allay those concerns we have with this whole technical aspects, fine aspects of interoperability and putting it to work. I think one of the principles, and I speak not just about our efforts with Beacon Protocol, which has been a 5-year effort as a foundation FIDE. We've been working on across 15, 20 different sectors using the value of interoperable peer-to-peer transaction protocol that Beacon is. But I also speak from the experience that we have garnered over the last 15 years of doing some population scale open interoperable infrastructure designs in a country like India, touching 1 billion people through multiple times, 5 or 6 different transformation projects. We had our friends talking about it in the other panel a few minutes ago. And I think one of the principles we have learned from that is very, very important is interoperability is a very natural tool to solve for complexity at a population scale. How do you distribute that ability to solve and allow people to come up with their own contextually relevant cares and solutions to fulfill that care needs interoperability. But to make that happen, we don't think about society rising up to the level of technology. It's the other way. It's about taking technology to the level where the society operates. And I'll give you a few quick examples of how we have manifested that. During the COVID time, of course, all the public aided schools did not have digital infrastructure to get students back to schooling, whether it's from the confines of their home during the pandemic. And it was very natural, like with a typical Valley startup or a Bangalore tech startup, to think of, let's build this cool app and get everybody online and get into these online screens. But one of the ways we thought differently about how technology meets society is to ask this question about what is already abundant in the society around which we can think of technology. And it was very obvious for us to know that what is abundant are the textbooks. It's been there for generations. It's something that everybody keeps and carries, and it's a key sort of a medium of interaction between the pupil and the teacher, and the pupil and the teacher is the relationship, that societal relationship of trust that comes with pupil and teacher is abundant. So why don't we use that abundance and think of technology around it? So instead of building this big app, what we have done is to create a very, very simple interoperable QR code, with a digitally signed QR code, and plant it in the textbooks. Think of this as a digital portal from that area of abundance, from that area where the agency is already available for the students and the teachers. And what was remarkable is that, to this portal, of course, we could bring them access to a whole other lot of content and teaching mechanisms and methods and learning, whether it's from Khan Academy or any other such tools. It allowed market to also participate on that portal rather than creating siloed platforms. They came through that QR code enabled infrastructure for them to offer more learning content. And just to complete this anecdotal example, what was truly remarkable in that experience is we started seeing the scans not happening during the day, during the schooling hours, but in the nights. And we are seeing those scans in the night because we discovered that for the first time, the teachers who are generally incapacitated and lack motivation to prepare for their classes were actually scanning content themselves to access to new contents, new pedagogy styles from other teachers from the community, and actually use that to teach better. So it immediately allowed for it to be a teacher capacity building tool. Same infrastructure, but we could see unforeseen value. And that's where we thought technology is meeting the society, and not the other way. And I can give you many more such examples we have discovered. India could have gone the credit card way for the scale that it is. It could have done another 60 million, this big clunky POS machines as a way to drive electronic payments for safety, security, and creating your data exhaust for your own agency. But we did not go for these big clunky machines. We started printing QR codes and says, what is the abundance here? The abundance is everybody's going to have a mobile phone in India, and India has 900 million smartphones. So we said, rather than making this complicated technology go at scale, we make the scale with technology itself work at scale, not scale what works. And we put these QR codes and we put mobile phones. And today, with UPI, which is the other example of a protocol that we built in India before Beacon, does about 18 billion transactions per month. And we did that, we got there in 8 years. So this way of thinking about putting technology at the where you can meet the society already is how we should think about technology design in the first place. And we believe in this principle of not scaling what works, like scaling an Uber for the rest of the world, to actually think like internet of what works at scale and then manifest value in areas where there is enough societal abundance of trust and relationships, and use that to harness technology to unlock more value. So these were some of the things about, like I said, a little nuance and long winding answer, Sarah, but thank you for giving me this opportunity.
No worries. I'm also super happy to see that Jean-Bertrand has joined us online. And you already start mentioning examples about functioning at scale digital infrastructure that brings value to citizens. So I'll hand it over to Paul to hand it over to Jean-Bertrand.
Thank you. Jean-Bertrand, I'm very happy that you can connect. Can you hear us correctly? We don't see your video feed yet. If you can unmute and just tell us if you're... Maybe we give Jean-Bertrand just a few more moments so that he can talk from the perspective of the African Union Commission about this, how to scale next generation digital infrastructure for more data agency. I love the discussion about how to create incentives, or Jean-Bertrand said. Jean-Bertrand, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Wonderful.
I hope my video will also pick up.
We hear you well. We see your virtual background. We don't see you yet.
Okay, perhaps give me a few more minutes. I may switch the device, but okay, let me try and fix my video. Yeah, sorry for that.
No problem at all. We hope Jean-Bertrand can join us. This is part of the beauty of remote participation. So I was really fascinated listening to the remarks about the incentives. You talked a lot about the user incentives and the design, user-centric design of technology, which I believe is so important. I want to share a bit of this ecosystem, the systemic thinking approach that emerged from the Fair Data Economy Task Force. Because the core question was as well the same that we discuss here of how can we scale this new approach, this next generation approach to the digital economy? And the answer is on firm economic grounds. And for this to work, we need not only product market fit in the design of things, but we need to really think systemic. And the systemic sort of actions reside on 4 pillars that I mentioned in the beginning. And I just want to dig a bit deeper because I think it's very important to visualize this almost like a system with small clock wheels that have to be turned almost at the same time. There's not a resequencing of one after the other. All has to happen at the same time for this to work, is what the Fair Data Economy Task Force said. The first thing is on entrepreneurship and new business models. What is right now still missing a bit in the world is centers of gravity for impact-focused entrepreneurship that rethinks the value distribution, that gives birth to new, very innovative business models that blend economic growth with data agency. So we really need to think about how to create those new centers of gravity of entrepreneurship to innovate at the business level, the business model level. We talked a lot about next generation digital infrastructure. And here again, it's very important to probably, this is what the Fair Data Task Force told us, to think about it like a foundational step. So there are digital ID systems, there are data architecture pieces, and very important protocols like DSMP, like backend, like others, to enable the widespread adoption and drive this mainstream impact. And in addition, at the same time, we also need policy innovation and frameworks, because what is needed is the regulatory enabling environment. So what we need is forward-thinking policies that, one, safeguard data ownership, that defer the right to data agency to users or also businesses, corporate actors, while stimulating innovation and competition to create really a high-performing digital economy that has a sort of leveling the playing field to allow new market entrants with new ideas that really have this product market fit and correspond to this desire of users for better technology with powerful and scalable business models that allow them to really reach mainstream adoption. And the last piece of the puzzle is something that, especially at the Internet Governance Forum, is not a topic that is talked about a lot, which is a shame because it's very important, which is strategic capital allocation. Nothing works without money. So we really need to find ways to mobilize smart capital across private markets. There's also a part of public investment, especially on digital infrastructure projects. The government has to play a part, but how do we also mobilize private market capital, venture capital, and other forms of capital to scale high potential fair data economy ventures and enabling technologies at the infrastructure level? And how do we complement this by more innovative financing mechanisms? So I really invite all of us to think about it in a systemic way. And with this, I want to see if Jean-Bertrand, fantastic, we see you. So without further ado, I want to hand it over to Jean-Bertrand with the question of, what are your key takeaways as a member of the Fair Data Economy Task Force from this effort? And what role does Digital Infrastructure and Data Agency play on the African continent and for your digital strategy in Africa? Jean-Bertrand, can you hear us?
Hello? Yes, I hear. Yes, I think everything is almost perfect now. Hello, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Can you also see me?
Yes, we can, Jean-Bertrand.
Yes, sincerest apologies. I think I messed up the time zones. You know, I traveled from Addis to South Africa for this G20 meetings, and I completely got lost in the middle of these various time zones. But I really want to thank you, Paul, and thanks thanks to the Project Liberty Institute for organizing this session on such an important topic at the 2025 Internet Governance Forum. It was indeed a privilege to serve as a member of the Fair Data Economy Task Force established and facilitated by the Project Liberty Institute on fair data economy, alongside, as we all know, 17 other distinguished task force members with great minds, including Professor Deron, who, as most of you know, is one of the 2024 Nobel Economic Prize recipients. And we were given the chance, the unique opportunity to really reflect on how to create the conditions to unlock the multi-trillion-dollar opportunity that the digital landscape represents, actually. You will agree with me that with the acceleration of AI economy, which basically relies and builds on the same public digital infrastructure, you will agree that it was actually a very forward-looking exercise that was initiated by the Project Liberty Institute back then. So really thanks Paul, and thanks Bell, you know, all the great mind behind this project. Now, there are some very important recommendations in the in the work we did, and most of which actually resonate with the digital transformation strategy for Africa that we are championing at the level of the African Union, and it's also part that there are some element of it in the AI for Africa that South Africa is championing as part of its G20 presidency. So everything is coming together, and the key question, there are some key questions, you know. The first one is the recognition of the gaps that we are still experiencing 5 years into 2030, which is the target date for the Sustainable Development Goals. There is the recognition of the fact that digital public infrastructure carries or holds an immense potential that could really help unlock some of the economic growth that we need to be able to achieve the SDGs. There are some estimates, but let me just give you this one from Harvard University. It says that digital public infrastructure can unlock value equivalent to 3 to 13% GDP. With an average improvement, which means additional 6% improvement for emerging economy. Now, just to put it into perspective, Africa needs 7% to 10% of economic growth over a period of 30 to 40 years to achieve emerging market status. So if we were to, implement, to invest and be able to reap the benefits of public digital infrastructure, you can see that we will be able to reach those targets in a very short period of time. Because if you accumulate 13 and 6, you're basically at 19. If you make an average of it, you've got what you need to be able to unlock the immense opportunity that the digital landscape offers, and now the digital economy. Now the issue is our government cannot do this alone, because we are also living in an era where close to 3 billion people, or 3.3 billion people, to be very specific, according to UNTAD, live in countries that spend more on debt interest payment. So they therefore do not have the resources to be able to invest in digital public infrastructure. This is the dilemma. We know what digital public infrastructure will help achieve, but the government are constrained. What does that mean? It means a new approach is needed. This is where multi-stakeholderism really holds a great potential. And looking at multi-stakeholderism, it's not really based on just some philanthropic. No. It's based on self-enlightened interest. It is to say the businesses themselves, they stand to benefit from investing in digital public infrastructure, because it will then help unlock all these potential that we are talking about. And the private sector will be the first beneficiary. So we are actually saying, in the context of the digital transformation strategy for Africa, in the context of the AI initiative for Africa, let us invest massively in digital public infrastructure because of the immense potential that it holds, but also because it will help create a win-win situation for all the stakeholders. The businesses, they need to continue growing, and the only way to grow is to invest in those places that are lagging behind. So what is the alternative? The alternative is a fragmented world. The New York Times Magazine released an article that clearly shows that AI is creating a two-pace world, the have and the no have. So the question is, do we want to continue entertaining it? I think the platforms like the Internet Governance Forum actually provide an opportunity to reflect on what needs to be done, building on the work that organizations, institutions like Project Liberty Institute are doing, and say, let's choose the right answer. Let's not aim for a divided world where we have people sitting at the periphery of the system and people that are moving at a regular pace. The consequence will be continued growing nationalism that we are witnessing, because there would be a lot of people that are disenfranchised. And this is not happening only in the developing world or in the least, in the most impoverished countries. No, these gaps are also in some of the developed countries. So there is really a need to focus on delivering digital public infrastructure that works for everyone, that is sustainable, that is inclusive, and that can really help the world move towards achieving the SDG, at least getting closer, because today it's very clear with 17% of the SDG on target, there is very little we can do. But at least if we do the right thing, we can close the gap a little bit, and then going forward, we will be able to do more. So let me stop here for now, Paul, and looking forward to either the next round of interventions or contributing to other aspects of the discussions. Thank you, and sincerest apologies once again for the mess up. Yeah.
Very happy that you could connect, Jean-Bertrand. I hand it over back to Sarah, live in Norway.
Thank you very much, Jean-Bertrand. I think you made it clear that scalability won't be achieved without substantial investment. And I wish we could talk about investment much more, and we would need probably another session dedicated only to this, but that's a substantial and a key component of also the scalability of digital infrastructure. But you also mentioned something that interests me, is that it needs to work for everyone and it needs to be inclusive. And Wendy, with your broad experience and expertise in designing governance models, how can digital inclusion and equitable participation be realized when we have, and we talked about it during this session, hundreds of millions of users? How can we ensure systems that allow everybody an equal participation and an equal inclusion? And before you respond, I'm happy to see that there is already questions online. After Wendy's response, I'll open the floor to everybody in person, and we'll start with the first question online after Wendy. So, Wendy, over to you.
Thank you, and I'll try to keep it short so that we can get to those questions, even though it's a deep and challenging question, because I think we reach for the essence of participatory design and governance, and to be building with the participation of those who are affected by the systems and ecosystems. And as was referenced earlier, we have people who are at all levels of technological sophistication, all levels of engagement with the technology, those who are designers and builders, those who are users, those who are not yet users because they don't have access to the technology, and finding ways to include all of those perspectives and give people real options for participation, and not just the semblance of inclusion. Is a real challenge, and so I think what we can try to do is to work progressively and to ensure that the structures that we're constructing are as inclusive as we can make them, to represent the experiences of participants from all walks of life. It's important in participatory design to recognize that expertise can take a variety of forms, and that lived experience of a particular background is as important as technological expertise or legal expertise to making an equitable techno-social construction that works for people. But we also recognize we can't do everything at once, and so building a sense of temporariness in the early stages, recognizing that while we can try to do the best we can at inclusive governance, when people come and say they are not yet represented, being open to hearing from them and expanding to be more inclusive is important. I think the where there are resource inequities and imbalances, we need to start by being conscious of that and taking extra steps that what we're designing isn't just enshrining an existing balance of power, but making space for those who don't have the same economic advantage right now. And that's not just an altruistic perspective. It's if we're really talking about how we grow the data economy, it's looking to people who will be participants if given opportunities, and those have to be real opportunities. It's not just the opportunity to be a consumer, but the opportunity to share ideas, to be entrepreneurs, to be social entrepreneurs, and to participate in governance. So those are some of the principles that put in place, and we're working in places like the DSNP governance frameworks to put those into action, and I hope we'll have opportunity to engage more on that in questions and answers.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wendy, for those final insights. So I'd like to ask Xian Hong from UNESCO to ask her question. She is online, and then we'll take your question in person. We'll take them together, and then we'll ask the panel to respond to it as well as you, Jean-Bertrand, if you're still with us. So Xian Hong, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Paul. Actually, congratulations for having successfully raised this important aspect of the data economy, which I didn't see much debates at the IGF because we all talk about the data governance from more political angles. So that's really such a value added to the entire IGF. But as you know that we are here working with other governments. So what strikes me that what the panelists would think that this can imply what implication for the governments, what should they do? I mean, in face of this such a multi-trillion-dollar data economy for sustainable development prospect, but also facing so many risks and challenges. And what should we do for governments? Because in the past years, in my work, I've been promoting maybe a more conservative approach that data protection, protecting rights, privacy, but maybe we didn't put the equal and attention on the harnessing the potential of data. But now the data is new opportunities for any country to want to prosper in the digital age. And at the institutional level, I mean, the capacity building, I mean, the new approach, as you just touched upon, what we should do? Because to my knowledge, we had already having maybe 120 countries who have created their data protection authority. If we want to make sure the government cannot miss this opportunity, can put in place the right framework, regulation, or policy strategy to encourage this digital infrastructure development and the economy, shall we recommend them to create new institutions for this kind of data agency or data stewardship? Or should we also encourage the existing data authority to expand, enhance their capacity to cope with the challenge of the data economy? That's my question for you. Also, I appreciate the panelists in terms of geographic diversity. If you can share more about the regional perspective, that would be also useful for me. I imagine the situation, the challenge in Asia and Africa and Latin America might be quite different stories. So thank you. I really look forward to learning more from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Xian Hong. So we have a very government-oriented questions for the panel. Could you please introduce yourself and then ask your question, and then the panel can take Xian Hong question and your questions.
Yes, thank you. My name is Veronica. I am with the Youth Pirate Party of Sweden. And I have a question that's not very governmental, more a philosophical question about the future of social networking. I and my party recognize the wills of many people to want to remain anonymous online. And I wonder, with the advent of this, for example, DSNP, the future of an interconnected internet where, for example, your workplace may use the same account as your political opinions on a different social network. Is there any plans to go forward to recognize the right for people to want to remain anonymous on this new internet? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Thank you, Xian Hong. So 2 questions, 2 very different yet complementary questions, I believe, one technical and one philosophical and one more governmental. To the panel, you can go ahead knowing that you have 3 minutes left to respond to all of this. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first to address Veronica's question. And from a DSNP's perspective, I think it's important to maintain that ability to have anonymity or pseudonymity online, and not just in kind of a social communication space, but in all aspects of how we engage online in a digital economy as well. So I think there are affordances within the DSNP protocol and many others to do that, to not be bound to a single identity, to be able to have multiple personas across different aspects of what we do. And I think it's also important to distinguish that from, say, a governmental identity, which I think is appropriate for certain uses, but not necessarily for all the spheres of communication that people want to participate in.
Maybe Jean-Bertrand for the governmental question, if you want to take that one.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you so very much for those comments and questions. What is very clear, like I said, is that there is only that much the government can do, but there is what they can do. For instance, what we are doing in Africa, we are laying the foundation, the legal foundation for digital public infrastructure to expand and for the digital economy to thrive. For instance, we had the what is known as the Malabo Convention on data protection, which was there. Of course, it needs to be updated and to take into consideration the evolving environment. We recently, as last year, our heads of state adopted the AFCFTA, African Continental Free Trade Area Digital Protocol. We have a protocol on digital trade, which basically provides a framework for accelerating the digital economy in this market of 1.4 billion consumers. It's also clear that the government should, beyond the legislations, there is also a need to put in place the other elements of what would be considered as a conducive, enabling environment. In some instances, for digital public infrastructure, you need even physical infrastructure itself. So the government needs to put in place other legislations, ancillary legislations that are needed. There are also instances where it's just to guarantee the investment to provide the necessary guarantees for investment to step in and deploy the resources that are needed. But what is very clear is that whether governments in some places can do it or not, we still see the opportunity for philanthropics, for the private sector to step in, and this is on account of the huge opportunities that are there, and that they stand to harness if they were to invest. Now, if you just take digital public infrastructure as a road, all of us, we use roads every day without even realizing that someone built it. It's only when it's not there that all of a sudden we realize that, oh, it's actually critical. So I think in areas, in sectors like minerals, there are examples of public-private partnership to build digital public infrastructure. This can be replicated in the digital, in the data economy. We have, like I said, private sector that have gone alone or solo to do it. The M-Pesa revolution in Kenya, for instance, it was all private sector led.
I'm
but
sorry,
today we
Jean-Bertrand. I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
We're out of time. There was also a question online that we didn't manage to respond to. So this just proves also all the more how this conversation is important and how it needs to include everybody in the discussion. So I wanted to thank you all so much because we have to leave the room for the next session, unfortunately. But we can definitely continue this discussion. As we mentioned, you can go on projectliberty.io and you can find the Fair Data Economy recommendation. You can also find our recent Digital Infrastructure for Data Agency report. And later today at 2 p.m. at the IGF, for those in person, we'll have a closed-door session to continue and deep dive on those discussions. So if there's anybody interested in joining, please come to us and we'll make that happen. And in the meantime, please join me in thanking this wonderful panel today, and thank you all.